Now, all the talk about the Antichrist, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, as time beckons, it doesn't really become a symbol of continuity, no matter how people look at it, because they try to end some movement that had continued or started from one point of, let's say, history to the next, to one where they see a fresh outcome and a new beginning, which they might like to call themselves those freedom fighters or those hellish combatants, the forces at evil, as the personifiers of the chapter or the closing of that, and so that the world finds a different new beginning, or a transitory world in which to attire and fashion to their respect. Let me just make this perfectly clear, that any antichrist material all stems from the oldest crime in humanity. And you think about the vulnerability factors, be it the gullibility of human beings and the master manipulated theories behind anti-Christian people. What is it to be a Christian? Symbolized in a simple universal definition, meaning or description, a Christian is not limited to anyone. It is to be a kind and humane person, or kindness towards humanity. So the oldest crime in the world is rape against individuals. And whilst they target in their facet, right? You think about the ecumenical purpose. You think about the ecumenical approach of established industries. It would have nothing to do with the context of a civilization kept within its willingness and its free will to engage, impose, say depose, and to allocate or highlight a dependency on goodness, kindness, and humanity towards, right? Because of the society factor. Social conservatism is not political congression. Social conservatism is a very bleak, bland, flourish, and self-indulgent, proprietary of course, but kind of expertise level, like the methodology behind it. For example, democracy relies or requires demonstration to a people from many nations, hundreds of nations far abroad, right? In order to imitate and emulate conventional methodology. And within the democratic world, they seem to think that they have a right to go after people freely in order to learn tricks, to learn the pros and cons of convention, just like the way in which they formulate their roundtable discussions, no different than the social environment, the conformity of which sees them stir private cauldrons of witchcraft amongst themselves in a sort of a private affair. The conventional methodology is what they forever seek, but then as it diminishes through the decreasement of, let's say, universal language, call it an ecumenical approach, stepping up the ante or upping the ante to reveal a stronger link with the community in the world, it never stops people in so many respects in which to tailor their own conservative realm or practice, in which to, of course, in a lot of cases, these industries or peoples with such digital access to people's lives, follow their digital fingers, which is a form of rape. Like a zombie that wakes from the dead, or people that are like they're just their last chance is sort of having some social immunity, or having a social imprint in which sort of choreographs the effort in which, like, their social structure and their nationalhood or their national dependency from that very sector or that nation. Lots of nations are different, especially in their democratic hubs, but of course that even further highlights or impacts the way in which it has a universal language in which to bridge with mankind, right? As if to dominate these fields of what, in fact, master manipulation or fast-track manipulation is, and we can get into that. You find these sad but sore and very sorry raped, robbed and persecuted fieldworks of stolen copyright distribution and fieldworks of accreditation ill-substantiated by the claim in which would have saw those individuals impose ill will towards humanity. Very unkind, trying to substantiate somebody else's material, like anything you can pluck from the Bible, which bibliography or biblical people are not, in fact, religious people, right? So these are people that have basically just taken somebody else's chronological history in a desperate attempt in which to carve it and make it as their own, or to claim it as their own. That's the way in which industry works. So the pure meaning of the word rape, in all of its entirety, for as many hundreds, if not thousands of years, it has all come together, pulled together, as like a magnet to connect us with where Einstein would say relativity, right, to anything that imposes itself upon past, present, future, that imagination is more important than knowledge. So the fact that even when you're captured or being raped, imagining that you can escape that pre-existent knowledge, or the knowledge that you are being captured and raped by such digital material that the industries impose on people through movies, through music, through the way in which social media now tries to dominate the fieldwork of even parliamentary conservatism, parliamentary fieldwork, of that in which comes to the attention of the working minister, those sanctified in their positions to have an outreach of kindness and humanity towards greater people than those social parameters of predatory and media publications, right? Rape means threefold. Three. It's in actual order, priority, right? The number one meaning of rape, to understand it fully, and this is going to shock people because of the clutch on humanity, or the clutch on the universal spectrum of an industrial trade, and the mechanisms in which we pull together private conversations. The Bible does say, let this not be of a private or vain interpretation. It states, and I quote, the three meanings or descriptions or definitions of what rape is 1, 2, you follow this word by word. 1, to penetrate somebody's physical entitlement without their prior will or consent. Let's make that again very clear. The most unadulterated, right, established meaning of the word rape is 1, to penetrate somebody's physical entitlement without their prior will or consent. 2, it is to seize by theft or to that effect. Do you think about that? And 3, improper use of power and or abuse of power and influence 1, 2, 3. Does this not sort of seem to shape and mold some democratic societies or certain proprietaries? What is a proprietary? An established standard. So therefore, any Antichrist material relates to sabotaging individuals. Therefore, it keeps it within context when it tries to highlight who, what, whence, when it came. You won't find intelligence. You won't find IQ, intelligence quotient, in a flat still photograph. So therefore there's no IQ. In fact, IQ relates to further quotient in the now, the sort of, reparates, if not sort of, coincides with previous intelligence or quotients, famous proverbs that the world had supplied to get to an area where individuals of such intelligence can provide quotient, and it puts it into a spectrum, into a field work where that person is seen as, through grade level assessment, right, as a person who provides intelligence quotient. A lot of people do not do that. In fact, they look for still photographs. The world is dominated by photography, the same way in which, let's say, any newspaper, publication, magazines, media, the works, but you can't mistake the good outlets in opposed to the bad outlets, and you can put retail sector into that, right? They take still, non-emotional, non-speaking, unintelligible pieces of material, and they mold and highlight and vandalize and ransack the living proof out of it. The living proof. This is a dangerous area for people to prioritize. And you think about the word sodomy, like Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom. People's gods have become houses of brick, wood, stone, land, right? That just sounds like your house and land package. God of house, brick, wood, stone, gold. This has become your house and land package, and you slave your guts and worship that like nothing else in the whole wide world. Not to mention your jewelry, and not to mention your photographs, even if it is the world's. And how dare you take a still photograph, and of course, like a person's demeanor, their establishment, like you might claim Prince William of the Buckingham Palace, of the British hierarchy in England, as the Antichrist, but of course he wouldn't be. That's to take something well in advance of its time, and to slander and to persecute an already established breath of fresh air to this world. But because even the Bible keeps it within context for people to take those references within the Bible, and then people mold, craft and manipulate what the Bible says, take it well out of context, and then do what they do to piece together documentation, just like a 25-30 minute bloody YouTube flick or something they can send out there for people to sodomize by themselves, or for people to necessarily put into the public arena, and those, the areas that, like social practice or private witchcraft or cauldronisms, right, will have you sort of believe, especially if people with very low IQ or people with very, dim attention span, or fail to have their minds opened up to the world so that they sort of get a clear but most perfect view of conversion, or being able to simply convert what they know. You can't forsake something unless you know it. You can't forsake something unless you know it. So if it doesn't actually directly involve you, you've got no business in which to cast shadow defense of any pre-mold standard or pre-mold cast. Can you? No. But you will take it like material that is not yours and do that, and this is what we call theft. Even pilfering your wage contempt. You use it in war, that's contempt of waged warfare. Do you understand? Right. So, to sabotage individuals is an age-old classic, isn't it? Of course it is. You know? You sabotage smart, sophisticated, intelligent, sexy individuals, both male and female. This is what the world goes after through lasciviousness. It goes after through obsession or even relationships. If people cannot obtain someone through obsession, then a lot of people, sometimes they become aggressive and hostile towards that individual and smash their name all over the place, ruining that individual as if their obsession and their lust was so strong for that person, because that person might actually be found, even what the Bible might say about the fallen angel, or the supreme angel. That's right. As smart, sexy, sophisticated, full of wisdom, he's a soprano, he can do everything, you know. He's everything for that time. And they, on account of his pride, which pride means plural in the English language, it's not, you know, it's not self-centered, selfish, rebellious to that effect. It means pride. It means like a pride of lions, swarm of elephants, like a mob of wankers. It takes more than two people to wank, and it's like that when people have a baby, or wanking's a mob mentality. Pride, on account of those wankers and his beauty, God had to make him desolate, low to sort of protect him, but at the same time, that's how the curse was put upon them, or cast upon him, to protect him in the end, like the second coming of Christ. When he is found low. And then he rises back up, and like yin yang, in with the yang, out with the yin. In with the yang, out with the yin, but make sure that they pay for the bloody treatment. Because you would know where those wankers are, and what it is to see the Christ. Anti-Christ equals anti the first coming. Let's repeat that. Anti-Christ equals anti the first coming, because you've preached Jesus. The true gospel has not been preached since the first century. The Romans killed Jesus through military conflict and military occupation. Jesus was the sole sacrifice of a people and a civilization that was being ripped apart by Roman Empire, military occupation and conflict wherever they could cast their influence throughout the world, through tribune and through despotism. Jesus was the shining light to a world, that rebellious free world of the Roman Empire that started all this. Look at the British Empire. It's the greatest extension of the Holy Roman Empire, the most extensive, wealthiest one. But that doesn't make them evil after time. What happened to Jesus basically spells just a breaking of time, and he showed us the truth. If it was not for Jesus, we would not know who Moses was. We would not know who the Hebrew slaves were who actually survived. So if it was not for Jesus, we wouldn't have known that Moses existed and what happened to Jesus, and that the Hebrew slaves survived and had to endure what they went through. But of course they built that hub too. So there wouldn't be as Hebrew slaves if the Catholic Church states that it's like saying that they're stating that they're Roman slaves. If they're not the case. But because of course Jesus' people didn't kill him, the Jews didn't kill him. The Bible says it right there, through Pontius Pilate and through, right? Caesar didn't. The people did. Jesus challenged the status quo. He did what he did. He was an incredibly wealthy, smart and hard-working individual. Most people can't read and write. Thank you, Jesus, for that, and what Jesus wants us to remember through him, and the one thing Jesus wants us to know, right, rather than take him for granted, like great individuals in their time, in the period of the course of mankind, in history of the earth, is just to simply remember him. Like the tomb of the unknown soldier, basically, the Bible is Jesus in print. If it was not for Jesus, this is Jesus' document, history. Just by bringing up Moses that was stricken from the record by Egypt, and bringing up the fact of, yes, these were Hebrew slaves that survived, Hebrew that take on an aspect of proclamating and prioritizing Aramaic family law, which is a good thing, apart from the rebellious free world that has come against those civilizations too, knowing that the original Middle East, even back then in Israel, was a predominantly Muslim society, and there was no Christianity until after Jesus of Nazareth. The birth of Christianity, as if Coptic Christians have been around, but it was never given birth to, and it had never been established. That's what Jesus established. Thank you, Jesus, for enlightening us and to show us the truth behind what happened to Egypt, arguably the greatest civilization in the history of mankind. They know it, but this was the end. This was the separation. This was happening. This was real. This is the Roman Empire that ripped apart this civilization to a degree that had them influenced, but of course not totally defeated or whatever. You know, giving account to both sides, not taking sides here. But to understand, like Jesus, nobody remembered Moses. He just wants us to simply remember him. He wants us to remember him so that you don't mistake it, so that you don't take him out of context. And you've done that again, same with the second coming of Christ. Industry and corporations have done this subsequent of World War II. Anything that would vindicate both Germany or Israel, and any branch that actually coincides or takes away from these great two nations with such massive influence on their regions, Germany being, if not the most dominant influence on Europe, and Israel being the most dominant influence on the Middle East. Right? It vindicates both of them. Envy itself, the term envy is talked about pride, but envy is when people don't want you to have what you've got. People don't want you to have what you've got, in opposed to jealousy. Jealousy is when people want what you have. They may not cut it. Envy is the fuel and power behind all vindictiveness and resentfulness. And at the same time, just like civil liability and compensation towards the masses or people in general, even individuals, also speaks of the vindication which is to flow and stem from it as a result. You think about that with the envy or people that just do not simply do for their country what their country can't do for you. The entitlement of humanity and mankind, civil responsibility, exercising restraint in those material standards of living, to be politically, socially, scientifically, religiously, and civilly responsible for your actions. The same way political correctness comes into the predicament, the same way scientific continuity through ingenuity, through sparked pooled blank space modifications, people put out papers, people put out flyers, people put out documents, people put information into the public arena, like science be the utility of conscience. That's pretty much all science is. Then we know what society and religion and civil responsibility requires of people. It's irrespective to those political traits and the scientific fields. These are the two main frames that dominate our world, and which you say does not exist in common everyday life. Well, I'm sorry, politics is in everything we do. Science is in everything we do. There's even a social science to us. We don't have this, we don't have social science as an absolute compulsory a compulsory area of study in school. We don't have cultural diversity, and we don't have home economics, do we? Or do we? These are three main areas in a 21st century world of transitory field work, or in a transitory world that we live. These are absolutely key to make sure that we get right what was pre-existent knowledge. To this day, people are radicalizing the living hell out of, which we are still fighting war because of certain countries like the accent you might hear from me caught in a fucking den full of freaking thieves, right? Have no respect for people past and present. Not having what it takes, so it's sort of all about them. And you will know investigation in opposed to investment. A lot of people doing investigation like they're on a security pathway, but no. Stability and security are two totally different things. People try to control the masses through these intellectual properties or through, intellectual iconoclasm, basically. They try to do it through brochuring and pamphleting and documentation and radical ideas and radical extreme pre-existent knowledge. Because it's not theirs, they can sort of touch on it. Some people, they grasp things. They take the living piss out of it. People die of hypothermia. Physically, spiritually, emotionally, subject to such claim. What do you mean hypothermia? Well, life's a bit like hypothermia, like a thermal canister. When you take the piss out of it, you absolutely die of hypothermia. Wouldn't be a scurvy interpreter. I wouldn't be privy to who St. Patrick is, but I'm sure that Christmas is every goddamn day, and Christmas itself is just a separate holiday for those pagans, heathens and non-believers, to nail it shut. To nail it so that you can remember that at the end of the year, after every day is gone, it's not a holiday. This is what Christ pays for, what people pay for through life and limb and sacrifice to give us these wonderful, beautiful political systems. The greatest that the world's ever known. You couldn't mistake it once you get in it. But the moment you sort of go away, you look at pictures, you're not in the reality. You're not taking on your workplace. Thessalonians chapter 1 verse 4, the entirety basically. What is the will of God? It's not the will of two stiff shits. The will of God is your sanctification, just like your workplace practice. It's to abstain from all sexual immorality, period. How does that relate in the workplace? How does that relate in the school system? Right? Exactly. And how does it relate even within the context of, let's say, your job description, your enrolled term of use, your termed usage of enrollment, your workplace priority, your practice, the way in which you engage with people. And it is to take control of your own vessel. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. To basically exercise restraint. Exercise behavior, behavioral exercises. So that you become obedient over time and you know it full well. It's like to say, it's one thing you have it in your mind, but once it transfers to your heart, you make a heartfelt decision as much as you have heartstrings which actually play that way. And like the temptation to play an instrument, it's only that to the skilled user of the instrument. To other people, it means nothing. That's where example steps in. And the greatest mediator sometimes is that of example. So how can you take the piss out of Prince William? Or look at these individual head figures and say, that person is, that person is, that person is, that person is. Well, you better get it right, because I'm sure that it isn't. At the same time, you will take anyone with smartness, sophistication, education, full of wisdom, a sense of beauty about them. You know, they look like they've got it all together. And you still go after them, and you will put them into a field work of a pooled modification for people to stare at a still photograph or a document or something. There's no IQ to that photograph, but like a bunch of dogs, a pack of dogs, mob of wankers, you will sit there over it like a bowl. And what happens to a mob of wankers or a pack of dogs when they're looking at a bowl full of food? They're all happy, they're all slobbering over it. But the moment they've got to fight over it, taking some of it, they start getting aggressive. That's like homosexuals. Homosexuals are people who demand intimate relationships with members of the general public in private places. And if they don't get it, they become aggressive. Have you seen the aftermath of pedophiles? Have you seen the aftermath of homosexuals? Pedophilia. Pederastry leads to pedophilia. Homosexuality leads to pedophilia. Anything that takes away the greater dependence on oneself and their holy, consecrated, upright, position in this world, irrespective to, let's say, their private engagements. People have a right to private relationships with their partners established like you would know them. You're not supposed to photograph people's wives while they're in the shower. You're not supposed to be taking people's children away from them, because we all are somebody's child, no matter how old we are, whether you're 2, whether you're 12, whether you're 40, 80 or 120, going on seeking to be 150 because you have an entitlement and a right to go after it. Anything that takes away a person's greater dependence on oneself, anything that basically takes away the greater dependence on one thing, period, is corruption. Corrupted files, corrupted data files, corrupted photographs, the way in which you corrupt it through your verbal antagony. Obsession leads to conviction, and conviction leads to your pathology. It stems into an area of psychopathoreticism. It's a big word, isn't it? Might as well name it myself. Of course, if you found it, you discovered it, 4th term grad of science here, right? Then you basically, in a nutshell, see it through trend. You can't teach theory with conviction, because people will damn well know when you have no conviction, just like the title. You know what people are like with theft? Penetrating people's physical entitlement without their prior will or consent is at the heart and core of all security in this world. And while we have things like banks, while we have things like locks on our doors, while we are equipping our minds to make sure that we steer clear of that, what it is to sort of at the same time govern your institution like a headmaster principal, in opposed to, let's say, a governing hierarchy's principal position in fieldwork. It's a big job, and yet just like any established standard, you will find through Proprietary Limited that pedophiles and these, let's say, people who rape the masses or rape people are established. Like it's a Proprietary Limited, PTY Ltd, they are established. And this is the overwhelming predicament and world in which has been built in so many cases, taking away people's families, ripping it apart at the core, through the seams, with psychological division, weakening the pillar or the foundation of that humble abjectory, that immunity to everything in which you build upon every day, dissolving, deteriorating, and diffractioning, basically shattering our human psychology and our mind frame of mind, to the point where this is the overwhelming standard. And when you see it, you're not even got forces stamping it out as if it pumps industry.
Your Honor, this is a third offense. This is
an established standard.
Repeat offender who hasn't gone to her probation officer in months.
Your Honor, my client is pregnant and has been unable to complete her visits.
Your client is pregnant and unable to complete visits, but was out there in the street selling drugs? Bail is set for $2,500. Next case.
Docket number 3745, State versus Cora Lee Tucker.
Okay, I will. I got you. Don't worry about nothing. I'll speak with you later, okay? Get me out of here.
And so never take for granted what it is to have an intimate relationship of yourself, or an imminent circumstance at your greater control. Confidential, but then be careful of materials and evidences to the modern day 21st century. Doing everything they can to claw back and turn over their 20th century industrial material, which would be no different than sabotaging the forefront. Born into a world with nothing means like you're just percolating it up, or just you're infatuated in areas that just want to bring down human enterprise. Animal activism. Animal activism is one major area. Got to get rid of the animals. You want to clean up your house, get rid of the animals. Right? But of course, you are people that will not let it go. because they spend their whole life accumulating and going after something that simply isn't theirs. Nothing in this world is of our own, anything, and it all starts with people. People, power, percentage, prejudice, predicament, penalty, productivity, and then perch. And with a further extension to that of purchase. Once you go through all that, succession as a series of getting your priorities right, your judgments, priorities into gear, basically, then you understand what the meaning of rape is, and that it's the oldest crime in the world, and where these sectarian, or where these sects or these hidden, mysterious allegations and accusations towards individuals happen when they put them in the spotlight and have people follow their digital fingertips. So that you follow their digital fingertips like you're surfing a glass glacier, or a track like a wound in which they want you to lick and keep that wound positioned. The wound. Think about the tale of Jesus where he says, the everlasting wound supply, that redeeming love has been my theme and shall be till I die, that we serve a God of mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment, but you better have judgment at the very top, even if people are innocent. Because you've got to have a sound judgment, a pure, sound impartation in which to even impartate for our children, and not just accept that children can do this. The same way Christianity, or even the Byzantine era, of the same era, would highlight that Christianity is a children's world. That's what Christianity means, basically, in a nutshell. Christianity equals a Christian's world. Christianity equals a children's world. We are all a child of someone, past or present, even to be those adults where we say, thou shalt not commit adultery. Righteousness is more original than sin, like children's innocence, in opposed to the guilty association of adults. They don't want to make some contextualized effort to have to be forced to get around it, whilst their natural incline says righteousness more original than sin. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Why would it be so? Because of the fundamental basis of reality, where people might say, you want a discount? No, I don't want a discount. I just want to count. I want to split my lip again from having a cigarette, and I want to open it up 7 days fold, every 7th day, by talking like this, and whatever the case. And I just want to rip it open. I'm a blister. You want a discount? Right? Talking like a motor man. I want to count. I don't want a discount. I don't want to be discounted. I don't want you to take somebody else's contract that I forged well with and fail to count on them, or count myself out of the picture or the game. Oh, but this will provide a discount. It will provide that concession. Hold up there. What the hell? I don't want to discount, like you say, course reality. I don't want discourse reality. I want to count on my provider, count on my partner. Looks like you're coming along wanting to slop over somebody's bowl, and you want to eat people's slops. You want to move in on my breakfast bowl. You want to take away contract. You want to penetrate people's physical entitlement without their prior will or consent. And you want to move into it like as if you've established the world like this, the systems, and some governments allow you to scheme upon people like that, smother all over them like that. You met your match sometimes, but of course this isn't the case until it does come, and when it comes, you believe anything you want. But at the end of the day, the second Christ will be suffering just as much, if not greater, than Jesus in a psychological era where Jesus was the representation, or let's say spirit of man. He represented all the fullness of God, the intercessor, whereas the second coming is the Holy Spirit of God. Haven't been received it. You got the archaeology, you got the times, the world of the anti-world. You need antiperspirant, like you need antifreeze, like you need anti-poison, like you need disinfectant. Do anti-Christian, does an anti-Christian of one caliber mean to say to sort of have to, take upon the current establishment, the current congressional world we live in? hit it head on, that you can't stop it regardless of what happens to him. Nothing's going to stop the scheduled event of the second coming of Jesus Christ. You have to believe and say yes. Like parody, like par before birdie and eagle and albatross, and to name your own. If you ever hit a hole-in-one on a par 5, we should call that pterodactyl. Until then, if you don't know, you wonder why you don't know. It's a mystery to people if you don't know, because people might as well be sabotaging them and raping them and killing them in private, like a possessive. Right? So therefore, that would speak for itself for 10,000 years. You think God's a mystery because you mightn't have known it, but Jesus created and provided a hell of a lot of what we see today. Without him, we wouldn't even have a timeline. Thank you, Jesus. He provided the timeline. Without him, we know it. He reached Caesar. He was forced to reach Caesar, and Caesar believed him. Caesar didn't not believe him. You can't say you don't believe in Jesus but yet you say you believe in Caesar. History books say Jesus, greatest person of all time. He provided. You have to imagine what it's like in that scale of time. You have to imagine that regardless of what happens to him and you and any of us, nothing's going to stop this. I perfectly believe it. Belief is stronger than faith. Life itself is stronger than love. Tolerance might provide a platform in which to sort of tolerate all of it, but I can assure you all this, is that nothing is of a secondary motion. Nothing is of a secular content. It's all within you. Anything that does take away that greater dependence on oneself, believe me, it's corruption. It's the same way in which you only wish to keep things within guidelines, within principle, within instruction, within obediences, so that you only hope that people can make a sound judgment and a sound decision for themselves. Because you can't teach theory with conviction. People will damn well know when you have no conviction when it comes to teaching or simply telling people. You will see the results on the soccer field. You'll see the results in the cricket team. You will see the results when you spend time and doing laps and isometrics and drills and push-ups and sit-ups, so that you become obedient to those practices and orders. The same way that you wish to instill and dearly depart this into the walking, talking, individual freedom and concourse reality of all individuals, especially treating other people's children like your very own. And for those that bring and that target and sabotage individuals, this is an age-old thing. It goes back to the beginning of time. No different than if Adam and Eve, that Eve was having a fling and adultery against the established father of Eve or something, and both were symbolized by the fig tree leaf on their naked bodies, sort of showing their sin. And hey, could tell you over and over again, but you won't do it. I'm not saying that's the case. Look, people have taken the piss out of that too, but of course it's just like that. It's not even yours. How dare you sort of go against it and say you don't believe when you were told. You don't pick an immature tree, like an immature cannabis plant. Don't pick it while it's immature. It's 17, 18 years old. Don't touch it. Oh, but it's awesome. Look how beautiful it is. Look how beautiful he is. Look how beautiful she is. Yeah. Well, did you ever consider leaving it to mature? Because when it matures about 26, 27, let's say, 10 years later, then it's good for the picking. Like an immature cannabis plant. Don't pick it while it's immature. That's the problem. It's 17, 18 years old. This is the world. Why don't you leave it alone? You've got to stop touching it. Look how beautiful he is. Look how beautiful. And it is somebody's child. Yeah. And it might just be that poverty rules, and poverty is the most powerful force in the world. Poverty is enough to make people do nothing. Either laze around and do nothing and want to have sex because there's nothing really you've got. You might spend your spare cash on sex. You've got industries these days to do that. You might even spend your spare cash on marriage certificates. You might spend your spare cash on matrimony, because those habits and addictions only last a few years. Just like your satanic movements. You think about that. Nothing's more important than life itself. You can't mistake what you touch, but you can mistake what you taste. Taste is the most common hallucination, and smell's a close second because you're so fucking sensitive. Touch is the least most common hallucination, and sound is the second closest least common hallucination, because even a blind person has to rely on touch, and by or through sound, through compulsory standards, rely on where their furniture is nothing out of place. You might call that obsessive compulsive disorder, and it requires treatment and prescription. But let's not discriminate here and take people vulnerable and gullible and take them for second rate, and treating the humanity in people all over like defective vehicles. If you expect to be that proprietary standard, you might call your fucking child limited edition. Hate to think it'd be your only one too, or two or three. But, you know, can you stop it? Of course you can. How do you do that? Well, just keep doing what you do, because I'm sure the policies will throw you into a curse that is irremovable. Like voice signature verification devices contained within one key element of human enterprise, which is that of life and cleanliness. If you want to get dirty and filthy up the place, then you go ahead, because you will rot, you will deteriorate. You will see industries coincide with that which says, I cannot explain why we burn and fuel the living guts out of these things. Because you have to learn to go without, which means exercise your restraint, and especially towards individuals. If it doesn't directly involve you, then don't. You will see the day when these digital rapists, through digital social media and digital documentation, had their ass served to them on a plate like the greatest awakening you have never seen ever in your life. Let's say the greatest conjuring that you've never seen in your life. Like it was all purely designed that way. You have to believe it, but adhere to that judgmental, periodic person when he has come, convicting the world of sin, righteousness, and of judgment. Thank you.